What will the markets focus on? It's very difficult, of course, not to focus on the horrific news that we had over the weekend, but how should the markets interpret it?
Hard to say. I mean, I think the markets, to a large extent, are looking at the moment at the severe rise in the number of infections and, unfortunately, the death toll, and they're coming to the view that things will get worse before they get better. I mean, I think that is an accepted view. But given the fairly positive view that we had in the markets last week as a consequence of the stimulus programs, again, I think reality is setting in. And it's going to be a long haul, both for the economy, for the markets, and, of course, for all of us who have to deal with the consequences of the coronavirus. So I don't really see much good news on the horizon, I'm afraid.
Peter, how do you model it out? So will you figure out exactly how many companies, will have to go bust, and whether the stimulus, both fiscally but also from central banks, will be enough to keep everyone afloat? And is that where you decide what happens to equities?
I think you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. On the one hand, I mean, there's both a bottom-up and a top-down way to do this, and I think both of them are valid. I mean, certainly my view would be to look from the top-down initially and say, what has to happen to markets generally in order to cope with the kind of expected GDP collapse that we're expected to see. To a large extent, I think that's factored in, although I'm not entirely clear that the markets realise just how bad the economy could be in the second quarter. But then I think you do have to look from the bottom up and say which companies are going to take a relatively larger hit than another. And you can, I think then give some sense as to which companies are likely to suffer the most, because obviously everyone is suffering in this crisis. It's just a question of some will suffer more than others.
Will the market impact actually be worse than 2008, and will the economy be worse than 2008?
Well, I think the economic impact will be, yes. Certainly the kind of downturn that we're expecting in the second quarter of this year will be quite significant, and I think worse than 2008 for sure. The question, obviously, is do we get a V-shaped rebound or not? And my sense is, given the magnitude of the hit that the economy is going to take in the second quarter, it'll be very difficult to see a significant V-shaped recovery. Hopefully a bounce, but then thereafter the recovery much slower. And in terms of what that means for the markets, well, they will suffer a lot of damage. Companies will suffer a lot of damage, and it will take an awful long time for that to be repaired. So in the same way as the economy, really struggles, I think, to gain traction in the second half of the year, I think the markets might suffer as well. So we might start to see markets levelling off, but upside again remains fairly conspicuous by its absence, I suspect.